Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel to check today's video out. Guys, today I want to have an honest discussion on forward-facing sonar and Livescope. Now, this isn't going to be another one of those, all you guys that know me and have seen the other channels out there, you know that I bash forward-facing sonar, so this isn't another bass session. I want to sort of like come at this from a perspective of as far as fishing goes, as far as on sort of an advanced theory level, sort of give you guys my tips not my tips and advice, but my opinion on it, because I think it might offer some clarification to you all as bass anglers moving forward, just in, however you like to catch fish. So we're going to get into that in today's video. Also, guys, quick invitation. I just want to invite you to check out, it's just about done, the 12 days of Christmas sale at Tackle Warehouse. If you guys are needing to get some tackle, not a better time to do it, man. They got a bunch of good sales. I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video if you guys would like to check that out, and I much appreciate it if you guys would take advantage of that. Okay, we have if you guys watch my videos on intuitive angling, I've been been the most outspoken voice on forward-facing sonar and Livescope. But in today's video, I sort of want to approach this a little bit differently in terms of putting my prejudice against it. Now, don't get me wrong, I still think it's the worst thing that it's ever happened for the sport. But I do realize also that the reality of the situation, for good or bad or whatever, mostly bad in my opinion, is that it's part of our sport, man. And it probably will be for the foreseeable future, simply because there's so much money in it. So I sort of want to talk a little bit about your approach to fishing in terms of if you decide to use this or you don't decide to use it, and give you guys some tips and advice on that. Now, first of all, when there's two schools and there's two different worlds in bass fishing. You have the aspect of bass fishing where you're technique fishing, you're pattern fishing, you're developing an understanding of bass movement and behavior. This takes time. This takes a lot of time. And this is one of the reasons that forward-facing sonar is so attractive to a lot of people, because it cuts out that time required to learn about the sport. And basically the technology does the work for you in terms of locating fish. Because with forward-facing sonar, the whole aspect of fishing to find fish goes out the window. Doesn't exist anymore. I'll give you guys a prime example of what I'm talking about. I was fishing up at Stockton Lake last week, and I was fishing jerk baits on points. Now, if you approach fishing from a non-forward-facing sonar perspective, like I do, when I pull up to a point there, I look at that point and I try to determine if that is a good point or not. I don't know. I have no clue if there's a fish there. But I look at the way the point's laid out. I look at the way it breaks off into deeper water. I look at the water clarity. I look at the way the wind hits it. I look at the point and how it's set up in terms of relationship to other structures in the lake. And if it fits what I think is going to catch a fish, then I'll go and fish that point. But again, I don't know if there's anything there. The only way that I can find out if there's any fish there is by fishing that point. That is the approach. Now, from a forward-facing sonar perspective, that same point, you're not in that same mindset that I am. It's like you're not looking at that point and trying to determine if that point is a good point or not based upon all of the obvious external variables, like how it's set up, position, the slope of the water, all that deal. That becomes a non-issue. The only thing you do is you go over to that point and you scan your forward-facing sonar on the point. If there's fish on it, you'll fish it. If there's not fish, you go on. Most people that are really good at forward-facing sonar, they don't make a cast ever unless they're casting to a fish they see on that screen. So you can see the tremendous difference as far as the approach of fishing goes by using forward-facing sonar versus not using forward-facing sonar. So given that, it's like a lot of people have to make the determination which road they want to go down. Now, like I said, I have bias on it, so I'm really going to try in this video to keep my bias tamped down, which is very difficult to do, I can assure you guys. But if you're one of those anglers out there that are just hell-bent on using forward-facing sonar and Livescope, then one of the things that you're going to have to do if you want to get good at that particular technology is you got to leave everything else behind. You can't ever focus on traditional bass fishing again. You're going to have to get rid of your traditional bass fishing lures and approaches. There's no need for you to have crankbaits, no need for you to have jigs, creature baits, buzz baits, topwater lures. There's no need for any of that. The only thing that you have to do is you've got 3 lures that you're going to have to learn to use. A forward-facing sonar minnow, or like a little swim bait or something like that, a drop shot, and possibility with a jerk bait. Those literally are the only 3 lures that you have to learn to use. Now, the technique itself is secondary to actually finding the fish on that forward-facing sonar. And if you're going to approach fishing from a forward-facing sonar perspective, you have to have this mindset is when you go into the lake that you're not doing anything else but that. You're going to put that trolling motor down and you're going to go to the parts of the lake that you think those fish are setting up to be caught like that, and you're simply going to scan and look for them all day long on that screen. You can't, if you go out there and you're fishing for 2 or 3 hours and you don't see much on your screen, or if you're seeing fish and you cast to them and they're catching some crappie or white bass or carp or whatever, and then you start getting burned out on it and it's like it's not working, you can't like go over and start flipping boat docks, or you can't go over to the back of the cove and throw a buzz bait back in there, or you can't go down to a nice looking rocky bank transition and throw a crankbait on it. You have got to stay out there and keep hunting for those fish that are out there roaming around. That is if you're wanting to get good at it and wanting to fish like that. So it's like anything else in fishing. It's like you're going to get good at something in fishing when you make a commitment to it. And that's the same way with fishing like I do, fishing shallow water, not necessarily just shallow water, but fishing places that you can fish with just traditional 2D sonar, 2-dimensional sonar. You can still fish deep with 2D sonar, but you can't, do anything else beyond that. But if you're going to fish like I fish and how like a lot of the bass anglers fish, you can't use forward-facing sonar. You can't like, if you go and, like I said, you're flipping bushes, or you're trying to throw a swim bait on windy points, or you're burning a spinner bait down a bank and it's not working, and then all of a sudden you see guys out there in the middle of the creek live scoping and they're catching fish. You can't go out there with them, man. You can't resist. You have to resist that temptation to break up your strengths in fishing, and you have to keep focusing on your wheelhouse. Because one of the things you have to remember, guys, is that there are 2 populations of bass that live in every lake. There's a population of bass that live in shallow water relative to the water clarity. The shallow water may be 10 or 15 feet or less if it's clear water. It may be 3 foot or less if it's muddy water. But there is a population of those bass that live there 12 months out of the year. There's also a population of bass that live out offshore, suspended, roaming around in wolf packs at least 11 months out of the year, except for the spawn. So that's one of the things you have to focus in on. It's like maximizing the percentage of fish that are in shallow water, and you have to figure out how to catch those fish. And that's where the true art form comes in, because knowing that probably in most lakes, depending upon the time of the year, probably anywhere between 20 to 50% of the fish are going to be in shallow water, depending upon water clarity and time of the year. And probably 80 to 50% of the fish are going to be out in the middle of nowhere roaming around, again, depending upon the time of the year. So knowing that, you have got to make a complete commitment to that. And you have got to learn the art form of, figuring out the lure they want, figuring out the lure profile, figuring out the lure color, figuring out the retrieve of your lure, line size, rod action, casting angles, sunlight angles, just a myriad of variables that determine if you're going to catch those fish or not. So hitting upon those is what makes fishing more difficult, because shallow water fish, for the most part, are a lot more difficult to catch. They tend to be a little bit more wary. They tend to be a little bit more heavily fished for, the fishing pressure. So they're simply harder to catch than, if you find them out there in the middle of the lake. So it's really a decision that you want to make. And like I said, I'm trying hard. It's hard for me to not really go off on the just the destructive element that forward-facing sonar brings to our sport. But I do realize there's people out there that want to fish like that, and they enjoy fishing like that. So that's sort of what you have to do with it. So anyway, I hope that was a fairly neutral perspective on forward-facing sonar. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll talk later.